All right, we're watching Delial Midas. There's been a lot of games happening today. Of course, that doesn't matter to you, deep in the distant future. But we got Seto versus Turds, two games, both five starters, continuing the kind of prevalence of five starters in SE Ultimecia, and they both led to ties. Interesting looking games, but I haven't checked them in depth. Just saw the move order and thought the second one seemed like a very strange creative move order. We also got good friends Blizzard and Tezuka playing today, and I think this is a nice follow up on Blizzard's really strong run in TTAC, where he played very well and eventually lost a really close quarterfinals to Seto 2-1, with really close to winning it in the closed game, taking the set 2-0 actually. And here, it looks like from a quick scan that he gave Tezuka a good match, but eventually lost there too. And I think that's where kind of Blizzard is as a player right now. Strong and gonna give good matches to the top players, but not quite knocking them off at this point in time. But I remain excited to see if if he keeps playing tournaments where he ends up, because I think he's played them well, and I think he has given good matches to strong players. All right, so my thesis, and I haven't gotten to talk about this yet, is there are five hand constructions for this rule set. And I have listed them out, though you won't have to see them written out. But we have number one. So the rule set is same plus combo, so no plus wall, very important to remember. Level 5. You can have a maximum of 4 sevens in your hand. You can have a maximum of 2 7 6s in your hand. And then some other stuff I forget. No rare semis, something like that. So one way to do this is you could have 2 7 7 4s, and then you'd be out of sevens, and you'd have to use things like 6 6 5 5s, which is clearly the popular choice. There's also 6 6 5 4s, and there's a few other options we'll mention. No triple numbers, so no 6 6 6 3s. Otherwise, those would be really relevant here. Hand number two is you go 1 7 7. Still grab a 7 7 corner, but you take two of these 6 7 6s. You can see the behemoths are very popular. They've been used in a whole bunch of the games so far, which might make me a little scared to run them, because I'd worry that on second turn, I'm so likely to have to set up one of them for my opponent at the end that just my guess, without having looked at this, you'll notice the two have very similar hands here, but my guess is that first turn has a solid advantage, because it's just hard. Your best cards set up their best cards, and that can make it tough to play endgames. All right, so hand number two is you have 1 7 7. That's going to use two of your sevens up. There's no restriction on 7 7s except for using up sevens. And then you can still have two of the 6 7 6s, and then you have two of the 5 6 5 6s or whatever. Hand number three, which is what we're seeing both players run here, is two 6 7 6s, two 7 5s, because you have some sevens left over that you can use, and then you only need to I can't speak. Run 1 6 5 5 6 or 5 6 5 6, whatever of those. And so that way, as you can see with both these hands, you can keep more sevens in your hand, but you don't get like the raw power of a 7 7. And 7 7 4 probably not making that much of a difference with no plus wall on, so I should probably just call them 7 7s. Hand number four is kind of offbeat ideas. Maybe you run 7 6 5 4s. We have seen that run actually by Seto, I believe. But cards that aren't taking the huge power of a 6 7 6, but are using like, hey, this is a useful card that I can make stuff work with. And I think that offbeat is viable, and if Seto did it, what can we say? And then option number 5 is that Mystic Quest is the most busted deck on the planet. Now, in this case, by busted, I mean absolutely terrible. Mystic Quest has some cards that are not normally on level 5, right? A 3 5 6 6 is a level 4 card, and it's a high-end level 4 card in total power, like if you just add up the numbers, but not a very good level 4 card if you actually care about, the numbers involved and how you get to that power. But not only does it have a 3-5-6-6, it has two 3-5-5-6s, which, you know, technically higher power than the 3-4-5-6s on level 3, but a weaker card. This would be a card people would not run on level 3, and it's on level 5. So Mystic Quest is this incredibly bad deck with just poor cards all over the place. Um, I think this is amusing. Like, what harm does it do? But it is funny just how weak the cards are. And we actually saw Tezuka running Mystic Quest cards. And I think there is actually a use for them here because they do offer number values that you just can't find elsewhere. There's quite limited choices for your kind of extra cards here. Both players here going for 6-6-5-5s. But if you think everyone else is running 6-6-5-5s and want to run something different, a lot of the alternative choices are going to be found in Mystic Quest. All right. Vid mentioned 7-5-4-5 and 7 might be fun. So this is an entirely sacrificial move, but I think we can quickly see the idea. Because if you sacrifice something to Behemoth exactly, right? If only Behemoth can capture it, then you're always going to have combo setups against it, right? So if 7-5-4-5 and 7, 6-3-6-7 and 8, um, well, how do you want to do it? You don't want to play 6-3-6-7 and 6 because then they have both combos too and they have last turn. But this is an interesting idea type. We also might notice that the side to side power in both hands is kind of limited, right? Like Deli's 5-6-5-6 that he used actually could take every card in his opponent's hand and his own side to side except for the behemoths. And there's a if you can start playing off fives left and right, like there are 3 5s left and right in Midas's hand. Deli actually mentioned to me that he thought people were overrunning 7-5-4-5 rather than like 7-5-5-4. And I think specifically this is because he's worried about redundancy. Um, of just like if you have a lot of fives in a direction, it can be hard to deal with. Right. Midas goes in 5. And this is one of those moves that often says, my hand is built to do this, right? And if we look at Midas's hand, right, one of the appeals of the 6-7-6 hands, and this is what we saw in the Seto Turds match, is you basically can have 4 cards circling it where you have a 7 in each direction. And by playing 6-5-6-5 in 5, you leave yourself uncommitted directionally, and your behemoths can play off it to capture 6s, which they normally couldn't take. On the other hand, here, it doesn't actually set up his cards at all, but it also doesn't set up Deli's cards at all, which is an interesting effect. Now, if I'm Deli, I am thinking about grabbing safety here. I notice that specifically Midas's only capture in 2 is 6-7-6-3, which is a low number facing out. And so I wonder if we could play 5-5-7-4 and 6, just taking the safety. Remember, there's no plus wall, so no 6-3-6-7 is comboing in 9. I think Midas is probably obliged to play 6-7-6-3 and 2. I think anything else is really weak. And then Deli has. Maybe it's not quite enough. I was thinking Deli has, among other options, 6-3-6-7 and 9 is safe. But then Midas can start building out safety too with 4-5-7-5 and 1, which locks in 2 as well. There's no combo through 5 there. Deli could also stick any one of his cards in 1. 6-7-6-3 and 1. So saying 6-2-1. 6-7-6-3 does get comboed by 4-5-7-5 and 4. Doesn't get comboed by 6-7-6-3 because we already drew that out of Midas's hand. 5-5-7-4 we can't use because it would be comboed, and we've already used it, so that would be cheating. 6-3-6-7 doesn't have the capture, so I think we're left with 7-4-5-5 and 1. That makes the game 5-5, but Midas has multiple pleasant captures there. That seems not very appealing. Okay. So maybe forcing the action in 6, I think it's the kind of move where my guess is it's unlikely to be a loss, but obviously you want more than that. I'm not loving how Deli's hand clicks here, actually. Again, with here's another idea. What about maybe 5-5-7-4 in 4? Just saying this is, you have very limited captures here, and all the captures you have, I have combos back. I threaten to at some point occupy 1 and lock in my card. By keeping a 7 up, I make it a little harder for you to have safety in 6. You do have safety in 6, but you can't capture anything while you have safety in 6. But I think that's probably just a tie. Something like 5-5-7-4 and 4, 4-5-7-5 and 6, say 7-4-5-5 and 7. Like the S's like that are probably, I guess that's a Z. The Z's like that are probably just a tie. Is there a way to pressure here? I don't know. I don't really see it. I almost think that Deli misses having 5-6-5-6 in his hand here. And I think the 7-5-4-5s are playing better in the lines I'm calculating than the 5-5-7-4s. Having the 5s left and right to play off, sometimes I'm worried they just won't connect, right? Like nothing connects in 6 for them. And if they don't connect, they have no captures, or very reduced captures. But there do seem to be enough 5 side to side running around, and the 5-5-7-4s seem kind of clunky to me. So we're going to get a move here. We do see 6 played. I should be inputting these games into my database. We want the 2024 one because we're in 2024. And Delial Seto. Incidentally, this move order of going in of a corner and center card followed by someone going next to them rather than going in the distance is just so much more popular now than it used to be. I think Midas has to play 6-7, 6-3, and 2. I suspect there are other moves that tie, but I don't know why you'd want to try to figure them out. I think you just play the standard move, and you play what comes. I'm going to be pausing this video regularly so I can go grab a bite to eat and respond to some messages. But that means there might be less downtime than usual where I'm just trying to fill space. So I guess a win for all of us, maybe? I don't know. All right, we're back, and Midas has indeed gone 6-7, 6-3, and 2, which I think was correct and the best and most practical move. I haven't recorded about, though I think I will, Midas's match with Sir Smokes in the first round yet. But I thought Midas played a very professional match there. I thought he had some positions in the first couple games that looked to my eyes quite dangerous, and I think he navigated them pretty well to ties. And then when Sir Smokes, he played a starter that put some pressure on, and Smokes replied very poorly. And Midas was winning from there and just held a firm grip on the win the rest of the way and handled it nicely. And so, he won it how I often win matches, which is like, it looks a little clumsy at first, but you're able to find a way to navigate to those ties. And then as soon as your opponent gives you a chance, you bounce. All right, so let's try to figure out what's going on here. 7-4-5-5 in 1 is probably the main line. And if met by 6-3, 6-7 in 4, you win, actually. Yeah, you have 6-3, 6-7 in 9. Sorry about my microwave going off. Because 6-7, 6-3 actually just dominates that endgame. So 7-4-5-5 in 1 is more dangerous than I gave it credit for, and this is a better idea than I gave it credit for. So probably 7-4-5-5 in 1 should be met by 7-5-4-5 in 4, making it 6-4 Midas. And then 6-3-6-7 in 9 is a tie. Those seem like the critical moves against that. So I think 7-4-5-5-1 is a tie, but there is one trap for Midas to be careful of. I'm sure Midas won't fall for that, but I think a lower caliber player, it would be pretty easy to just play 6-3-6-7 and 4 because you take and grab safety. But there we see how strong the behemoths are in the endgame for the first turn player. Yeah, there's also moves in 7 that I'm sure Deli is checking, but I don't have to because I'm not playing, so I'm going to go get food out of the microwave. See you soon. So before the site returned, I was messing about a bit. I found this online website where you could play against this not very good AI with FF8 cards, and it didn't have plus wall. And of course, I missed playing with plus wall, and it would just make these moves that like were super high risk, but just like if the center was blocked, it would just say stick something in 4 with high numbers up and down. And often you couldn't deal with those. Those are much safer with no plus wall on. So I think one thing that's really important is how, and becomes more important in no plus wall, is just potential safety in 2-4-6-8 or half safeties. Like, I like to think I've been one of the players that has brought this kind of 3-5-6 type move order to the forefront of top level play. But I think in a rule set like this, you should even more be looking for stuff like that. We do see 7-4-5-5 in 1. This is all going as expected. So Midas played 6-7-6-3 and 2, and Deli has now played 7-4-5-5 in 1. And I think Deli says his hand's a bit wonky. I think Midas will find 7-5-4-5 and 4, and we will be moving on to another game shortly. And Midas quickly identifies the right card to use in 4. You won't get to see how long it took because I had paused the video, but suffice it to say, Midas played this move quite quickly, like a minute or so. And we will be going on to game 2. So I think a nicely played game by both sides, and one that shows this is going to be a difficult rule set to make the cards click. But I do think Midas with the 7-5-4-5s, even though I think he was the one under pressure here, right? I think Deli mentioned he had some ideas in 7 he thought were close, as well as this idea in 1. But first turn's going to have an advantage, right? First turn is just so likely to have these powerful sweepers, and the opponent has similar cards. So I do think the 7-5-4-5s showed up well here. Deli mentions, and I sort of had this idea as well, that Golagros, if these hands stay the same, could just be a really powerful side-to-side card. Could be really good at picking up 5s. What have we actually seen result-wise for first turn, second turn? Okay, the only win so far was with first turn. And I believe 6-3-6-7 and 6-7-6-3 have been used by every player so far except for Seto. Turds, Tezuka, Blizzard, Delial, and Midas, 5 of 6 have used the Behemoth Twins. But interestingly, Seto, who does tend to pick cards that he finds dynamic and useful together, and I think has a nice feel for that, is the one player to go off the beaten path. Alright, when the second game has begun, we'll be back. And we're in game 2, but the important thing here is Vid thought Deli would change his hand. And Deli does not change his hands. That said, we see Midas being, I think, the second player to use the um, the 7-6 two 7-6s plus a 7-7 strategy. And this is smart. I was not thinking about same plus combo. So I was assuming 7-7s would be, corners. And that unbalances the hand a bit, but for a 7-7, you're willing to take some unbalance. This doesn't unbalance the hand, but it's so much better at sliding. It seems like in a lot of these games, two of them we've had five starters, and the last one, five was the reply to the starter and pretty clearly intended as the starter. And 7-3-7-3 can just plop next to them in 4 or 6. This was something that the piggy hand, which is, of course, very similar to this rule set. If we think back to the piggy hand, it used more 7s than would be allowed, but it starts with a 5-6-5-6, and we see a lot of those. We see that very card in this game, in 5. And then it has two 7-1-6-6s and 7-6-6-1 to play off it. And here we see 6-7-6s, but similar concept. And then it has a 7-1-7-1 and a 6-7-1-7. So the 6-7-1-7 doesn't exist anymore. But these cards were very good, and he was very good about finding times to slide them in 2, 4, 6, or 8, where they just have 7s facing out and are uncapturable with plus wall off. And so people would run 7-7 corners against him, but he understood that without plus wall on, the 7-7 verticals and horizontals could be just as strong. And I didn't think about that here, but it makes sense, right? It makes sense that this kind of card would have more. Is that a pig, by the way? It has a snout. Pig tree with snow on it? Huh. Hard to tell. Sorry if that was really loud. I got in close to my computer to see it better. Um, so yeah, I think we can see potential value in this 7-3-7-3. And I'm curious what kind of starter we'll see. I think we're probably not going to be seeing a side starter, but I'm curious whether he goes for something like 5, which we haven't actually watched a lot of, but has happened in 2 of the 6 games so far, or whether we see a corner probably with one of the 6-5s. Yeah. All right, we'll be back when that happens, and I'm gonna, eat more. All right, and we see our third center starter in 7 games. We can see that 7-3-7-3 might have a lot of play, and I think it will have a lot of play kind of almost no matter what, right? If Deli goes, say, 4 or 6, or really any card that square that isn't 2 or 8, a really plausible option for Midas is to go 7-3-7-3 and 4 or 6, either next to the card Deli has played or across from it. Now, if Deli sets up a lot of combo potential, then that stops being an appealing option, right? If Deli goes 1 and has huge combos in 2 and 4, and Midas goes 7-3-7-3 and 6 and does not have those combos in 2 and 4, okay, bad idea, right? Because combos through 5 will pick that card up. But it is a very serious threat in those squares. And so one might naturally think, all right, I want to go in 2 and 8, this times when 4 and 6 are not very good replies. But if you go in 2 or 8, it leaves the option of potentially that card lands really well in 1 or 3. Seems unlikely. Deli's hand has those squares pretty well covered. But it also just, the game's now up-down, and 7-3-7-3 is going to be pretty happy to see an up-down game. So I'm excited to see how this 7-3-7-3 plays. My first instinct for Deli is to go 5-5-7-4 in 3. Midas shares the combo in 2, but I really like having a combo in both squares. One of those combos is not shared by your opponent, and in fact, your opponent does not have a capture there. The one thing I don't like about this move is if you go 5-5-7-4 and 3, and at some point follow with 5-6-5-6 and 2, and you would want to follow with 5-6-5-6. Because if you follow with 7-4-5-5 and 2 taking the same, when they take you with 6-7-6-3 and 1, that's actually safe to your hand. So I think you want to use the 5-6-5-6 so you have the capture. But if you could control one via combo, this would be even stronger. So do we have some other similar setup elsewhere that we can control a little better at their potential captures, right? Because if like we could go in 7 and then block 8 and their only capture from 9 was 6-3-6-7 and 9, that would be much better for us because we have the combo in 6 there. So can we organize it? But I think we want to be playing off those 5s. I think we have much better play off the 5s than we do off other numbers. There's also 5-6-5-6 and 9, right? You have combos in both 6 and 8, neither of which are shared, and one of which is a 7 facing out. It's really useful to have a 7 facing out when you have the recapture in 6 or 8. Those are the moves that make it like last game. Midas had captures on the starter, but it had a 3 facing out, and that meant Deli could look for ways to get the initiative, which Midas neutralized really efficiently. But having those lower numbers dangling can really hurt on this kind of rule set. And so you want to be looking for something where there's the lowest chance of those numbers dangling, as it were. One thing I notice as well is if you go 5-5-7-4 and 3, it's really hard to land cards, and 6 is ever blocked. It's really hard to land cards in 9. Everything in Midas's hand, for instance, is comboed from 8 if it goes in 9. Just something to keep in mind. Deli says he's going to go aggro. Now, yeah, when Deli says aggro, he means captures. When I say aggro, I mean controlling space. So I thought the best moves were corners here. But it should be noted, statistically, both from like what the solver thinks is a win, tie, or loss, but also just actual results, corners and sides are basically equally viable across rule sets, replies to center starters. My bias is strongly towards corners, and I tend to have an easier time seeing the good corner moves, but that doesn't mean only corners exist. So Deli is going for, as we've said, sides are really important in this kind of rule set without plus wall. There is just a lot more safety and half safety there. And Deli's point here is he completely controls the space in 3, right? This card is safe to 1, and anything that could take it in 3 is comboed. In fact, they are both comboed by exactly 5-6-5-6. And then Deli also has some cards in 9 covered, right? He doesn't have everything covered in 9 anymore, because to cover the 3s facing left, he'd need to still have 6-3-6-7 in his hand. And Deli's threat, and specifically the reason he used 6-3-6-7 rather than like 6-7-6-3 or, in the same square, which has, similar setups going on, right? That card also can only be taken 2 ways, and both those ways can be comboed. But the reason Deli preferred this way is because he has a threat to go in 3 now, right? 5-5-7-4 is safe in 3. Well, if he played 6-7-6-3 in 2, 5-5-7-4 would not be safe in 1. So he's really aligning the numbers specifically, right? And trying to land something in 3. We also mentioned that 2 or 8 might be highly appealing because it reduces, in one sense, the efficacy of 7-3-7-3. I don't know how Midas tends to play these structures. There are certain players that will like always go in 7 or 9. There are certain players who really like going in 8. And there are certain players that will go in 1 or 3. I'm reminded of, there was the excellent match, TTAC 14, Piggyman versus Slash of Time quarterfinals. Tremendous match. Kind of forgotten about it now because it hasn't come up in a bit, and it was a couple years ago. But like, tremendous match. Go back, watch that one. Piggyman just finding ways to attack each game, and Slash finding ways to defend them. I hope I'm getting who played that match right. But I think that was Piggy Slash, and I think it was just a great game. And there was a setup. I think the cards were in 5 and 8, and Slash found a tie in 7, which didn't capture 8. It just said, "I'm taking some safety here, um, and that's just enough to get me a tie." And I think he did a really good job of angling his way to a tie there. And that's sort of my instinct in these positions, is if I can find something to do in 1 or 3, because those are kind of dead squares for me. I'd really like to find a way to do so. Now I haven't like looked at specifics at all, and 1 and 3 look like very well controlled squares by Delhi. But like I would really strongly like I would spend time calculating like the really stupid looking lines here, unless I thought something in 7, 8, or 9 was promising. One thing you might do is if you go in 9, say with a 7 up, then you control 3. But of course, that 7 up you can't actually recapture on its own, so that could be a problem. But I might consider 9 in the hopes of controlling 3. But I would also consider just walking into the combos. Say 6, 5, 6, 5, 3, Golagros in 6, and then say 7, 3, 7, 3, 9. Because that's a pretty forcing line, and if it works, you've just found a tie and don't have to check anything else. Now, I don't think it works. I think it just loses. So this is very dangerous. I like how Delhi has played this a lot. And we can see Midas feel forced to go in the distance. This game might be bad for my second turn is disadvantage thesis. But Midas has done something quite reasonable. He's kept his most powerful cards. He's played something he can recapture. But he needs a plan against 5, 5, 7, 4, and 3, right? So I mentioned that 5, 5, 7, 4, and 3, a really important thing is to be able to recapture with 7s facing out. And just in general with corners, that if you can recapture with 7s facing out, that's an incredibly powerful effect. Delhi has sort of artificially makes it sound negative, but he has creatively created that situation, right? He's gonna, if he wants, he's going to land 5, 5, 7, 4, and 3, but he's going to have already blocked its weak side and done so with a 7 facing out. And so that is a remarkably powerful effect, right? Because he kind of got what I wanted, but improved, right? He already has blocked the weak side, and he already did it with that maximum number facing out. And so this is, Delhi's doesn't have to actually take it immediately. And Midas may have kept powerful enough cards that he can hold there. But it does seem to me like Delhi went in the direction I was going, but found a way to get it with even more advantages. The kind of classic, you find a good idea, you can find a way to do it even better. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean was a better move, though it probably was. But I really like when I see an idea and then a player finds a way to execute it even more powerfully than the version of it I was seeing. And I think that's what we're seeing here. So I really like how Delhi has played this, and I think this was a really nicely handled, really interesting move, really interesting feel for a complex rule set. Right? Suddenly things for one of these players isn't so clunky, right? He had combos everywhere. So the chalk move, the obvious move, is 5, 5, 7, 4, and 3. Can you sequence it such that you get that even better later? One thing to note is 5, 6, 5, 6 is 8, but Delhi doesn't really have 4. You could play 7, 4, 5, 5, and 4 at some point, but you're pretty susceptible to combos in 8 there going through 5. If you're feeling really spicy, maybe you consider 5, 6, 5, 6, and 9. 7455 looks pretty good there, but I think 4 being a dead square for you makes creative ideas like 9 just not good. I think you need 4 to have play to for that kind of idea to be promising. Um, there's also just 6 7 6 3 and 8. You don't actually need 6 7 6 3 to sweep anything on the yeah. Um, and it doesn't capture 7, which is a problem because you're probably never going to get to capture 7. But like you could easily imagine like 6 7 6 3 8. Maybe that's not quite enough. Midas grabs some key squares. Yeah, I think Midas goes 9 there and should be fine. The Behemoth twins are very good. So I do think you want to go 3. And I think Midas played a good move here. All right, just as I say that, Deli goes for the, in some ways, more ambitious option because he keeps it open. But I thought 7 3 7 3 9 was comfortable here. All right, Deli is up 6 4, but it's really hard to blank the 6 7 6 3s. So one way to do so is you can play 7 4 5 5 and 4, which will get paired with 6 7 6 3 and 1. Neither of those flip any cards. But then the 6 3 6 7 on the right is going to go at least +1. So I thought this looked like an easier hold. But it's very easy to imagine that Deli spent most of his time on 5 5 7 4, found a relatively easy hold there, and then moved on to other tries that might be harder. But I did like the other attack more here. But I didn't spend a lot of time calculating it. For some reason, I spent more time on this move. Um, and now I think it should hold. There's also 7 3 7 3 4. Not yeah, 7 3 7 3 4. Actually, 7 3 7 3 9. Deli mentions that could be a win for Midas, and that is possible. I don't think it should be. I think so. I think 7 3 7 3 9. You can play 7 4 5 5 6. Midas goes 3, right? That makes it 5 5. But then you can play 5 5 7 4 and 4. You do have a capture, right? The 5 5 7 4 can land well. All right, I should not reply anything to that chat because should not, mention moves I think are relevant. But well, Deli currently thinks 7 3 7 3 9 is a win for Midas. I think he'll. I think it is a tie. But this rule set's tough. I think 7 4 5 5 6 ties. Maybe you can also start with 5 5 7 4 4. There might be 2 ties. I'm not sure. Either way, obviously, I cannot reply to those messages, and I could easily be wrong here. I'm trying to find what I'm missing. But 7 3 7 3 4, I think, is also a pretty relevant move here. Probably just a tie, right? Deli sticks something in 1. All right, he does go 9. This is the critical move. I think Deli is fine. I think Deli's up 6-4. I think he can go in 4 or 6. And I think he will find it. Let's send a message to Vid. All right, so let's double check. 7-4-5-5-6. You're still up 6-4. Neither of their cards can combo a 5 facing up. So if they go 3, it's 5-5. If they flip 2, and they should flip 2. It's 5-5. You go 4, 6-4, 5-5. Yeah. If you go in 6 and they go in 4, you can't combo them, but you can just take or go 3. Yeah, that's fine. If you go 6 and they go 1, that's crazy town, but we'll check it. Yeah, that's nothing. Yeah, so you can go 6. I think you can also go 4. They'll get there. It's so there's always every game, like, there's something that just doesn't click in your head, right? This is a complex enough game, there's something that doesn't click. So, like, if someone doesn't see something for a bit and takes a couple minutes to get there, that's sometimes just going to happen. Yeah. So what I think happened here was Deli had a quick freak out and did not was not seeing things clearly. So there's a series of messages of him being worried and now him going, thanks for letting me ramble to get through the freak out and not lose. And he's seeing it, and I have said nothing at all. So I'm yeah. So Vid, I think on point here, thinking either thinks it's 5-5 right now, in which case he would be lost, or doesn't realize he has the captures in 4, or hadn't realized. But yeah, this happens all the time. I remember there's a game I lost to Deli where there were 4 moves left, and similar to this, and I made a move and lost after thinking for my full time, which was 5 or 7 minutes. And then I received a barrage of messages of like, why didn't you play the tie? Like, I just didn't see it, It just didn't click in my brain. All right, got to try to finish my meal, so we'll do that while we wait for Deli's move. All right, not the move order that was the one I was going to pick, but I think this should work just as well. My food has gotten colder than it once was, but that's not the end of the world. And a big turnaround in this game. Big turnaround, right? Went from, I think this is very promising to Deli, to one totally reasonable move, and suddenly it's a little scary. Have to be careful. Tough game, Triple Triad. I think Midas is playing well. I think his move in 7 ended up giving him sufficient play and a really good feel for which cards to hold on to. And you might say that's kind of straightforward. It's the 6-7-6s and the 7-7, but I think nicely done. And we have another nicely played tie here. All right, we'll be back with another video. This has been going on 45 minutes. Yeah, we'll do another video for the next one. Great.